My name is Rebecca Thompson, and I'm 26 years old. Last week, my brother Tyler's wedding planner called to inform me that my family had canceled my invitation to his wedding, but I should keep the $65,000 deposit I'd paid for their venue. What my family didn't know was that I wasn't just a guest, I owned the entire wedding venue they'd booked, and their decision to uninvite me meant they'd just lost their dream location 3 days before the ceremony. Before I tell you how my family's betrayal backfired when they discovered I owned their wedding venue, I need to ask you something. What would you do if your family uninvited you from a wedding being held at your own property? The conversation I had with that wedding planner destroyed their perfect day and exposed years of family lies. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe because this wedding disaster shows exactly what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. To understand how spectacularly my family's decision to uninvite me backfired, you need to know about the business empire I'd been building in secret for the past 4 years while my family treated me like the unsuccessful black sheep who couldn't get her life together. At 22, fresh out of college with a business degree that my family considered useless, I'd used a small inheritance from my grandfather to purchase a rundown historic mansion on the outskirts of our city. While my family mocked my impractical investment and suggested I get a real job, I spent 2 years renovating the property into one of the most sought-after wedding venues in the region. Willowbrook Estate, as I'd named it, was a 15-acre property featuring a restored Victorian mansion, manicured gardens, a lakeside ceremony area, and reception facilities that could accommodate up to 300 guests. The renovation had cost me nearly $800,000, funded through business loans, personal savings, and reinvested profits as the venue became successful. But here's the crucial detail: my family had no idea I owned Willowbrook Estate. To them, I was still Rebecca the dreamer who worked some kind of event planning job and lived in a modest apartment downtown. They had no clue that their unsuccessful daughter was actually running a business that generated over $2 million in annual revenue. The deception wasn't intentional at first. When I bought the property, my family was so dismissive of my business plans that I stopped sharing details about my progress. When the venue started booking weddings, they assumed I was just an employee rather than the owner. Their continued condescension and lack of interest in my work made it easier to let them believe whatever they wanted rather than constantly defending my choices. "Rebecca's doing some kind of party planning thing," my mother would tell people when asked about my career. "It's not really a serious business, but it keeps her busy." "She's always been the artistic one," my father would add with the kind of patronizing tone that suggested artistic meant impractical and unreliable. Meanwhile, Willowbrook Estate was becoming one of the premier wedding destinations in our state. We were booked solid 2 years in advance, had been featured in multiple wedding magazines, and had won several industry awards for excellence in hospitality and event management. The irony of my family's ignorance became even more pronounced when my brother Tyler got engaged to Madison, a woman from a wealthy family who had very specific ideas about her dream wedding. Madison wanted elegance, sophistication, and exclusivity, exactly what Willowbrook Estate specialized in providing. "We're looking at the most amazing venues," Tyler had told the family during Sunday dinner 8 months earlier. "Madison has her heart set on this place called Willowbrook Estate. It's supposed to be incredible, but it's really expensive and has a 2-year waiting list." I nearly choked on my water. "Willowbrook Estate? Yeah, have you heard of it? It's this gorgeous historic mansion with gardens and a lake. Madison's been dreaming about getting married there since she was a teenager." "It sounds lovely," I managed, while internally calculating the irony of my brother wanting to book my own venue for his wedding. "The problem is they're booked solid for the next 2 years, Madison had said with obvious disappointment. "We'd have to wait until 2026 to get married there, and we don't want to wait that long. Plus, the cost is insane," Tyler added. "They want $65,000 just for the venue rental, and that doesn't include catering, flowers, or any of the other stuff." My parents had made appropriate sympathetic noises about the expense and the waiting list, while I sat there knowing I could solve both problems with a single phone call. But something held me back from revealing my connection to their dream venue. Maybe it was curiosity about how they'd handle the situation. Maybe it was resentment about years of being dismissed and underestimated. Or maybe it was just the perverse satisfaction of knowing something they didn't know, of having power in a situation where they assumed I was powerless. "We'll figure something out," Madison had said optimistically. "Maybe they'll have a cancellation, or maybe we can find somewhere else that's almost as nice." 2 weeks later, Tyler called me with exciting news. "Rebecca, you're not going to believe this, but Willowbrook Estate had a cancellation for next year. Madison's dream wedding is going to happen after all." "That's wonderful," I replied, knowing exactly why that cancellation had occurred, because I'd moved a booking to accommodate my brother's wedding without him knowing it. "The crazy thing is, they're not even charging us the full price," Tyler continued. "The owner apparently has some kind of family discount policy, so we're only paying $65,000 instead of the usual $85,000. I'd instructed my venue manager to offer Tyler and Madison the family rate without explaining what family connection qualified them for the discount. From Tyler's perspective, they'd gotten incredibly lucky with both the timing and the pricing. Over the following months, I watched my brother and Madison plan their dream wedding at my venue while the family continued to treat me like the unsuccessful sibling who couldn't afford to contribute meaningfully to the celebration. "It's going to be such a beautiful wedding," my mother would gush about the plans. "Willowbrook Estate is so elegant and expensive. Tyler and Madison are so fortunate to be able to afford something so luxurious. I wish Rebecca could find someone and have a nice wedding someday too," she'd add with the kind of pitying tone that suggested I was unlikely to achieve anything comparable to Tyler's success. The guest list drama started 3 months before the wedding, when family politics and Madison's social climbing ambitions began creating conflicts about who deserved invitations to their exclusive celebration. "We can only invite 250 people, Madison had explained during a family meeting about wedding plans. "With both our families, our friends, and my parents' business associates, we have to be very selective about the guest list." "Of course, immediate family is automatic," Tyler had assured everyone. "But we might have to limit plus ones and be careful about extended family and family friends." I'd assumed, like everyone else, that being Tyler's sister guaranteed my invitation to his wedding. What I didn't anticipate was how Madison's social status concerns and my family's shame about my perceived lack of success would eventually intersect to create the perfect storm that would lead to my uninvitation. The venue contract was signed under Tyler's name, with payments being made through a family trust account that Madison's father had established for wedding expenses. From the venue's perspective, Tyler Thompson was the client, even though I was secretly the owner providing the family discount. Everything was proceeding perfectly for a celebration at my own venue that I was supposedly attending as Tyler's sister, until family dynamics and social pressures converged to create a situation that would expose years of deception and change our relationships forever. The phone call that started it all came from my venue's wedding coordinator, Sarah Mitchell, who had no idea she was calling the actual owner of Willowbrook Estate to discuss a family situation that had developed regarding the Thompson wedding. The call from Sarah Mitchell, my venue's head wedding coordinator, came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly financial reports in my downtown office. Sarah had been managing Tyler and Madison's wedding planning for months, and I'd been carefully staying out of the process to maintain my secret identity as the venue owner. "Rebecca, I hope you don't mind me calling you directly," Sarah began, "but we have an unusual situation with your brother's wedding that I wanted to discuss with you personally." "What kind of situation?" I asked, immediately concerned that there might be a problem with the venue preparations. "Well, Madison called this morning to inform us that there's been a change in the guest list. Specifically, she said that due to family circumstances, you would no longer be attending the wedding." I felt my stomach drop. "I'm sorry, what?" She was very apologetic about the short notice, but she explained that there had been some kind of family conflict and that your parents had decided it would be better if you didn't attend the ceremony. "Sarah, are you telling me that my own family has uninvited me from my brother's wedding?" "That's what it sounds like." Madison seemed uncomfortable about it, but she said the decision had been made by Tyler's parents and that she didn't want to cause additional family drama by overriding their wishes. I was quiet for a moment, trying to process what I was hearing. My family had uninvited me from Tyler's wedding without even telling me directly. I had to learn about my exclusion from my own employee. Did Madison give any specific reason for why I was being uninvited? She mentioned something about inappropriate behavior and concern about family embarrassment, but she didn't go into details. She seemed to think you would understand what she was referring to. I had no idea what Madison was talking about. As far as I knew, I hadn't done anything inappropriate or embarrassing. My relationship with Tyler had been normal, my interactions with Madison had been pleasant, and I hadn't been involved in any family conflicts recently. Sarah, this is obviously a shock to me. Did Madison say anything else? She did mention that since you wouldn't be attending, she wanted to make sure we handled the billing appropriately. She said your family didn't want you to feel obligated to contribute to wedding expenses, so they wanted to cover your portion of any costs you might have already paid. This was where the situation became truly surreal. Madison was apparently trying to reimburse me for my contribution to a wedding being held at my own venue, not knowing that I was the one providing the location and had already absorbed the full cost of their celebration. What exactly did she mean by that? Well, she assumed you might have contributed to the venue deposit or other wedding expenses, and she wanted to make sure you got your money back. She said the family felt terrible about the uninvitation and didn't want you to be financially hurt by the situation. And what did you tell her? I told her that our payment records show the deposit was paid by Tyler through the family trust account, so there wouldn't be any need to reimburse individual family members unless someone had contributed directly to that account. How did she respond to that? She seemed relieved and said she'd pass that information along to Tyler's parents. She also asked me to call you directly to explain the situation, since she felt uncomfortable about you hearing about the uninvitation secondhand. I sat in my office chair, staring out the window at the city skyline, trying to understand how I'd been excluded from my brother's wedding without anyone in my family having the courtesy to tell me directly. Sarah, can I ask you to do something for me? Can you call Madison back and ask for more specific information about why I'm being uninvited? Tell her that as the venue coordinator, you need to understand if there are security concerns or other issues that might affect our service. Of course, Rebecca. I'll call her this afternoon and get back to you. After hanging up with Sarah, I immediately called Tyler to get his side of the story. Tyler, I just got a call from the wedding venue saying that I'd been uninvited from your wedding. What's going on? Rebecca, this is really difficult to explain over the phone. Can we meet somewhere to talk? Tyler, just tell me why I'm not invited to your wedding anymore. It's not my decision, okay? Madison's parents are paying for most of the wedding, and they have concerns about the guest list and the kind of impression the celebration will make on their friends and business associates. What does that have to do with me? Rebecca, Madison's family they're very successful, very social, very concerned about appearances. They've been asking questions about our family, about everyone who'll be at the wedding. And they're concerned about having family members there who might not fit in with the other guests. The implication hit me like a slap. Madison's wealthy family had apparently decided that I wasn't successful or sophisticated enough to attend their daughter's wedding, and my own family had gone along with their decision. Tyler, are you telling me that Madison's parents think I'm not good enough to attend your wedding? It's not about good enough, Rebecca. It's about compatibility. They want the wedding to be elegant and sophisticated, and they're worried about guests who might not understand that kind of environment. And you agreed with this? I want Madison to be happy, and I want her family to accept me. If they're uncomfortable about certain family dynamics, maybe it's better to avoid potential problems. Tyler, I'm your sister. We grew up in the same house, went to the same schools, had the same upbringing. What exactly makes me incompatible with their social circle? Rebecca, you know you've always been different. You're artistic, you're unconventional, you don't really care about the kind of things that Madison's family values. Like what? Like career success, financial stability, social status. Madison's parents are doctors and lawyers and business owners. Their friends are all very accomplished, very established. They're worried about family members who might not measure up to that standard. I was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the fact that my own brother had just told me I didn't measure up to his in-laws' standards of success and accomplishment. Tyler, let me make sure I understand this. Madison's parents think I'm not successful enough to attend your wedding, and you've agreed to exclude me to make them comfortable? Rebecca, please don't make this harder than it already is. This decision isn't about you personally. It's about managing family dynamics and social expectations. Whose social expectations? Madison's family's expectations. They're paying for most of the wedding, they're hosting all their friends and business associates, and they want everything to be perfect. And my presence would somehow make it imperfect? Rebecca, you work in event planning. You live in a small apartment. You drive an old car. You don't present the image that Madison's family wants associated with their social circle. The irony was so complete that I almost laughed. Tyler was excluding me from a wedding at my own venue because his in-laws thought I wasn't successful enough, while I was actually more successful than anyone in either family realized. Tyler, have you considered that Madison's family might be wrong about me? Rebecca, this isn't about right or wrong. This is about what's best for everyone involved. What's best for everyone involved is excluding me from my brother's wedding. What's best is avoiding a situation that could create tension or embarrassment for Madison on her wedding day. That's when I realized that my family hadn't just uninvited me, they'd fundamentally misunderstood who I was and what I'd achieved. And they were about to learn that their assumptions had cost them far more than they'd imagined. After ending the devastating call with Tyler, I sat in my office for 30 minutes, processing the full magnitude of what had just happened. My family had uninvited me from my brother's wedding, being held at my own venue, because they thought I wasn't successful enough to meet Madison's family's social standards. The irony was so perfect it felt like a setup from a movie. The family black sheep they'd excluded for lacking success was actually the business owner providing their dream venue. I called Sarah back to get more details about Madison's explanation for my uninvitation. Sarah, what exactly did Madison say when you called her back? Rebecca, this is really uncomfortable, but she was quite specific about her concerns. She said that Tyler's family had discussed the guest list extensively, and they'd decided that some family members might not be appropriate for the kind of sophisticated celebration they were planning. Did she mention me specifically? She did. She said that you were lovely as a person, but that your lifestyle and career situation might make Madison's family uncomfortable. She mentioned that you work in event planning but don't seem to be very successful at it, and that Madison's parents were concerned about how that might reflect on their family. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Madison was apologizing to my employee about my lack of success in the event planning industry, while speaking to someone who worked for my company at my venue. What else did she say? She mentioned that Tyler's parents were embarrassed about your financial situation and worried that you might feel out of place at such an expensive, exclusive venue. She said they thought it would be kinder to exclude you rather than put you in an uncomfortable position around so much wealth and sophistication. The layers of irony kept building. My family was worried that I'd feel out of place at my own venue because they assumed I couldn't afford to be there. Sarah, did Madison ask any questions about the venue ownership or management structure? Actually, she did. She asked whether the venue owner might be willing to provide additional services at a discount, given how beautiful the wedding was going to be and how much positive publicity it might generate. What did you tell her? I told her I'd need to check with ownership, but that additional services would depend on what specifically they were looking for. Perfect. Sarah, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to follow my instructions exactly. Of course, Rebecca. What do you need? I need you to call Madison back and inform her that the venue owner has become aware of the family situation regarding the guest list changes. Okay. Tell her that Willowbrook Estate has a strict policy requiring the venue owner's approval for any guest list changes that involve family members, particularly when those changes occur close to the wedding date. Rebecca, what are you planning? Tell her that the venue owner wants to schedule a meeting with Tyler and Madison tomorrow to discuss the situation and ensure that the venue's reputation isn't affected by family conflicts that might create negative publicity. Should I mention that the venue owner wants to meet with you as well? No. Just tell her that the owner wants to meet with the couple privately to understand the family dynamics and make sure the venue is comfortable proceeding with the celebration as planned. Rebecca, you're the venue owner. Are you planning to reveal that to them during the meeting? Sarah, my family has spent years treating me like an unsuccessful disappointment who couldn't possibly understand sophistication or achievement. Tomorrow, they're going to learn what I've actually built while they were dismissing my potential. This is going to be dramatic. This is going to be educational. For years, my family has made assumptions about my capabilities and my success. Tyler and Madison just uninvited me from a wedding at my own venue because they think I'm not sophisticated enough for their social circle. It's time they learned who they're actually dealing with. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for the meeting that would change my family's understanding of success, achievement, and the consequences of their assumptions. The next morning, I dressed in my most professional business attire, a custom-tailored suit, expensive jewelry, and the kind of polished appearance that commanded respect in high-level business meetings. This wasn't going to be a casual family conversation, this was going to be a business meeting between a venue owner and clients who had created a problem. Tyler and Madison arrived at Willowbrook Estate at 10 a.m., clearly nervous about meeting with the mysterious venue owner who had requested this urgent conference. Sarah led them to my office in the mansion's main building, a beautifully appointed space with mahogany furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and windows overlooking the gardens where their wedding was scheduled to take place. I was sitting behind my desk, reviewing contracts and financial documents, when Sarah knocked on the door. Ms. Thompson, Tyler and Madison are here for your meeting. Please, send them in. Tyler and Madison entered my office, and I watched their faces as they tried to process what they were seeing. Tyler looked confused, Madison looked shocked, and both of them seemed to be struggling to understand why I was sitting behind the venue owner's desk. Rebecca? Tyler said uncertainly. What are you doing here? I'm here because this is my office, I replied calmly. Please, have a seat. We have several important matters to discuss regarding your wedding celebration. Your office? Madison asked, still looking around the room as if she expected the real venue owner to appear. Madison, Tyler, I am the owner of Willowbrook Estate. I have been for 4 years. This venue, these grounds, this business, it's all mine. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see Tyler's mind racing as he tried to reconcile the sister he thought he knew with the successful business owner sitting across from him. Rebecca, that's impossible, Madison said finally. You work in event planning. You live in a small apartment. You drive an old car. I work in event planning because I own one of the most successful wedding venues in the state, I replied. I live in a small apartment because I prefer city convenience to suburban isolation. And I drive an old car because I'm practical about transportation rather than concerned with impressing people who judge others by their possessions. But how? Tyler stammered. How could you afford to buy this place? How could you renovate it? How could you run a business like this? Tyler, I bought this property with Grandpa's inheritance and business loans. I spent 2 years renovating it while you all thought I was wasting money on an impractical investment. I've been running this business successfully for 4 years while the family assumed I was an unsuccessful event planner working for someone else. Madison was staring at me like I was speaking a foreign language. You own Willowbrook Estate? I own Willowbrook Estate. The venue you've been planning your dream wedding at for 8 months belongs to me. That means... Tyler was working through the implications. That means the family discount you received, the convenient cancellation that made your date available, and the personalized service you've been enjoying are all because the venue owner is Tyler's sister, the same sister you uninvited yesterday for not being successful enough to meet your social standards. The irony was complete, and I was about to make sure they understood every aspect of what their assumptions had cost them. I need to pause here because what I'm about to tell you next is the moment where everything exploded in the most spectacular way possible. You might think that revealing myself as the venue owner would be enough to teach my family a lesson, but you'd be wrong. The choice I was about to give Tyler and Madison would force them to choose between their pride and their dream wedding, and their response would expose just how deep their superficiality really went. Make sure you stay subscribed because this family confrontation is about to get nuclear, and the fallout will shock you. Tyler and Madison sat in stunned silence as the full implications of my revelation began to sink in. Their dream wedding venue belonged to the family member they'd just excluded for not being sophisticated enough for their celebration. "Rebecca, I don't understand," Madison said finally. "If you own this place, why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us book it like regular clients?" "Madison, I've been trying to tell my family about my business success for 4 years. Every time I mentioned my work, I was dismissed as an unsuccessful event planner with unrealistic ambitions. You all made it clear that you weren't interested in understanding what I actually do or what I've achieved. But this changes everything," Tyler said desperately. "If we'd known you owned Willowbrook Estate, we never would have. We would have handled things differently." "Tyler, what exactly would you have handled differently? Would you have been more respectful of my career if you'd known I was successful? Would Madison's parents have considered me sophisticated enough for their social circle if they'd known I owned a multi-million-dollar business?" The questions hung in the air, exposing the shallow values that had led to my exclusion. "Rebecca, please," Madison said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "We made a terrible mistake. We should have defended you to my parents. We should have insisted that you be included. Madison, you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice based on your values and priorities. You chose to exclude someone you perceived as unsuccessful because you were worried about social impressions and family image." "We can fix this," Tyler said quickly. "We'll call Mom and Dad, we'll explain everything, we'll re-invite you to the wedding." "Tyler, why would you want to re-invite me now? What's changed except your knowledge of my bank account?" "Rebecca, that's not fair, isn't it? Yesterday, I was an embarrassing family member who might make Madison's parents uncomfortable. Today, I'm the successful business owner whose venue you need for your wedding. The only thing that's changed is your perception of my worth." Madison was crying openly now, realizing that their dream wedding was slipping away due to their own prejudices and assumptions. "What do you want from us?" she asked through her tears. "I want honesty," I replied. "I want you to acknowledge that you excluded me because you thought I was unsuccessful and unsophisticated, not because of any actual inappropriate behavior or family conflict." We were wrong about your success," Tyler admitted reluctantly. "Tyler, you were wrong about more than my success. You were wrong about my character, my intelligence, and my worth as a family member. You decided that I wasn't good enough for your celebration without knowing anything about what I'd actually accomplished." "Rebecca, please don't cancel our wedding," Madison begged. "We'll do whatever you want. We'll apologize publicly, we'll re-invite you, we'll make sure everyone knows how successful you are." "Madison, why would you want to publicly acknowledge my success now? Because you genuinely respect my achievements, or because you need my venue for your wedding?" The question exposed the transactional nature of their newfound respect for me. "I want to ask you both something," I continued. "If I weren't the venue owner, if this conversation were happening at a different location about a different issue, would you be apologizing for excluding me?" Neither of them answered immediately, which was answer enough. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, pulling out their contract from my desk drawer. "According to the terms of your venue rental agreement, the owner reserves the right to cancel any event that might damage the reputation of Willowbrook Estate or create an environment inconsistent with our values of respect and inclusion." "Rebecca, you can't cancel our wedding 3 days before the ceremony," Tyler said, panic creeping into his voice. Tyler, I can cancel any event that violates our standards. Excluding family members based on perceived social status and financial success creates exactly the kind of elitist environment that Willowbrook Estate refuses to support. But we've already sent invitations, our guests have made travel arrangements, we've paid deposits to vendors. You've also made decisions about who deserves to celebrate with you based on assumptions about their worth and sophistication. Those decisions are inconsistent with the values this venue represents. Madison was sobbing now, understanding that their exclusionary behavior was about to cost them their dream wedding. Rebecca, please, there has to be something we can do, she pleaded. We'll pay you more money, we'll make a donation to charity, anything. Madison, you think this is about money? You think you can pay your way out of the consequences of treating family members as social embarrassments? What do you want us to do? Tyler asked desperately. I want you to call your parents and Madison's parents right now and explain exactly what you've learned about my success and how your assumptions led you to exclude the owner of your wedding venue from your celebration. We can do that, Tyler said quickly. And I want you to acknowledge, in front of both sets of parents, that your decision to uninvite me was based on shallow judgments about success and social status rather than any actual inappropriate behavior on my part. Okay, we can do that too. And then I want all of you to consider whether the kind of people who would exclude family members for not being wealthy enough are the kind of people who deserve to celebrate at a venue built on principles of respect and inclusion. Tyler and Madison exchanged panicked glances, realizing that I wasn't just asking for an apology, I was asking them to examine and acknowledge the ugly values that had led to this situation. Rebecca, are you going to cancel our wedding? Madison asked directly. That depends entirely on whether you can convince me that you understand what you've done wrong and that you're genuinely committed to changing your behavior. What would that look like? Tyler asked. It would look like taking full responsibility for your choices without making excuses or blaming external pressures. It would look like acknowledging that you valued social appearance more than family relationships. And it would look like demonstrating that you've learned something meaningful from this experience. I picked up my phone and handed it to Tyler. Call Mom and Dad. Tell them you need to have an emergency family meeting here at the venue in 1 hour. Don't explain why over the phone, just tell them it's urgent and related to the wedding. Rebecca, what are you planning? I'm planning to give our family an opportunity to learn some important lessons about success, respect, and the consequences of their assumptions. Whether they take advantage of that opportunity will determine whether your wedding happens as scheduled. The next hour would reveal whether my family was capable of genuine growth or whether their superficial values were too deeply ingrained to change. The emergency family meeting convened in Willowbrook Estate's main conference room, a beautifully appointed space with windows overlooking the gardens where Tyler's wedding ceremony was supposed to take place in 3 days. My parents arrived looking confused and concerned, clearly wondering why they'd been summoned to Tyler's wedding venue for an urgent family discussion. Tyler, what's this about? Dad asked as he and Mom took seats around the mahogany conference table. We're in the middle of final wedding preparations. This better be important. Dad, there's something we need to discuss about Rebecca and the wedding, Tyler said nervously, glancing at me sitting at the head of the table in what was clearly the position of authority. What about Rebecca? Mom asked. I thought we'd already resolved that situation. What situation would that be? I asked calmly, though I knew exactly what she was referring to. Mom looked uncomfortable. Rebecca, Madison's family had some concerns about the guest list, and we thought it might be better if you uninvited me from Tyler's wedding because you were embarrassed by my lack of success and worried I might not fit in with Madison's sophisticated family. That's not how we would phrase it, Dad said defensively. Then how would you phrase it? We were trying to avoid potential social awkwardness and ensure that the wedding celebration went smoothly for everyone involved. By excluding me? By making practical decisions about family dynamics and social compatibility, Mom replied. I looked around the table at my family members, all of whom seemed to believe their explanations were reasonable and justified. Before we continue this conversation, I need to tell you all something important, I said, standing up and walking to the windows that showcased the estate's grounds. Tyler and Madison have already learned this information, but I want to make sure everyone understands the situation clearly. What situation? Dad asked impatiently. The situation where you've uninvited me from a wedding being held at my own business. The silence that followed was absolute. I could see my parents processing what I'd said, trying to understand the implications. Your business? Mom asked slowly. I own Willowbrook Estate. I have for 4 years. This venue, these grounds, this entire operation, it's my company. Dad's mouth fell open. That's impossible. Why is it impossible, Dad? Because you assumed I was an unsuccessful event planner who couldn't afford to run a real business? Rebecca, how could you afford to buy a place like this? Mom asked, looking around the elegant conference room as if seeing it for the first time. I bought it with Grandpa's inheritance, business loans, and reinvested profits. I spent 2 years renovating it while you all thought I was wasting money on an impractical investment. I've been running a successful business here for 4 years while the family assumed I was working for someone else. But why didn't you tell us? Dad demanded. Dad, I tried to tell you about my business plans for months. Every time I mentioned buying property or starting a venue business, you told me I was being unrealistic and needed to get a real job. We thought you were being impractical, you thought I was incapable of success, so you stopped listening to anything I said about my work or my achievements. Mom was staring at me like I was a stranger. Rebecca, if you own this place, that means you're wealthy. I'm successful, Mom. My business generates over $2 million in annual revenue. I employ 15 people. I've been featured in national wedding magazines and have won industry awards for excellence. Then why do you live in that small apartment downtown? Dad asked, still struggling to reconcile his assumptions with reality. Because I prefer city convenience to suburban isolation, and because I'm practical about my personal expenses rather than concerned with impressing people who judge others by their possessions. Tyler, who had been quiet during this revelation, finally spoke up. Mom, Dad, we uninvited Rebecca from my wedding because we thought she wasn't successful enough for Madison's family. But she owns the venue where we're getting married. The weight of their mistake was finally sinking in for my parents. They'd excluded their daughter from a family celebration because they were ashamed of her perceived lack of success, only to discover that she was the most successful person in the room. Rebecca, we had no idea, Mom said weakly. You had no idea because you never bothered to learn what I actually do or what I've accomplished. For 4 years, you've dismissed my work as some kind of event planning thing without ever asking for details or showing genuine interest in my achievements. But if we'd known you were successful, Dad started. If you'd known I was successful, what? You would have treated me with more respect? You would have been proud of me instead of embarrassed by me? We've always been proud of you, Mom protested. Mom, 3 days ago you uninvited me from Tyler's wedding because you thought my presence would embarrass the family in front of Madison's wealthy relatives. How is that being proud of me? Dad was getting defensive. Rebecca, we were trying to make practical decisions about a complex social situation. Madison's family has certain expectations, Dad. Madison's family expected sophistication and success. I own a multi-million-dollar business that provides exactly the kind of elegant, exclusive experience they value. Your assumptions about my lack of success were completely wrong. How were we supposed to know that? He demanded. You were supposed to know because you're my family, and families are supposed to pay attention to each other's lives and achievements. You were supposed to ask questions, show interest, and give me the benefit of the doubt instead of assuming I was a failure. Madison, who had been crying quietly throughout this family confrontation, finally spoke up. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I owe you an apology. My parents' concerns about the guest list were based on incomplete information about Rebecca's situation. If we'd known she was the venue owner, this entire misunderstanding could have been avoided. Madison, I said firmly, your parents' concerns weren't based on incomplete information. They were based on superficial judgments about worth and social status. The problem isn't that you didn't know I was successful, the problem is that you thought my success mattered more than my character. But surely now that we understand the situation, Mom began. Now that you understand I'm wealthy, you want to change your decision about including me? Now that we understand we made a mistake, what mistake did you make, Mom? Be specific. She was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling to articulate what had gone wrong without admitting the ugly truth about their values. We made assumptions about your circumstances that turned out to be incorrect, she said finally. That's not the mistake you made. The mistake you made was deciding that my worth as a family member was determined by my perceived level of success and social status. Rebecca, that's not fair, Dad said. We were trying to navigate a difficult social situation, Dad, you were trying to avoid embarrassment. You excluded me because you thought I would make the family look bad in front of Madison's wealthy relatives. And now? Tyler asked quietly. Now that we know the truth about Rebecca's success? I looked around the table at my family members, all of whom seemed to be waiting for me to solve their problem and restore their wedding plans. Now I need to decide whether people who would exclude family members for not being wealthy enough deserve to celebrate at a venue built on principles of respect and inclusion. The room fell silent as everyone processed what I was saying. Rebecca, are you threatening to cancel the wedding? Dad asked. I'm pointing out that your behavior toward me has been inconsistent with the values this venue represents. Willowbrook Estate doesn't host celebrations for people who exclude family members based on superficial judgments about success and social status. But we can fix this, Mom said desperately. We can apologize, we can re-invite you, we can make sure everyone knows how successful you are. Why would you want to make sure everyone knows how successful I am? Because we're proud of your achievements, you weren't proud of my achievements when you thought I was unsuccessful. You're only proud now that you know I'm wealthy. The truth was finally out in the open, my family's love and respect were conditional on their perception of my success. What do you want from us? Tyler asked. I want acknowledgement that excluding family members based on perceived social status is wrong, regardless of how successful those family members actually are. We acknowledge that, Madison said quickly. Do you? If I were actually an unsuccessful event planner living paycheck to paycheck, would excluding me from Tyler's wedding have been acceptable? None of them answered immediately, which told me everything I needed to know about their real values. Here's what's going to happen, I said, pulling out Tyler's venue contract. You have until tomorrow morning to demonstrate that you understand what you did wrong and that you're genuinely committed to treating all family members with respect, regardless of their perceived success or social status. What does that mean? Dad asked. It means you need to call Madison's parents and explain that you made a mistake in excluding me, not because I'm actually successful, but because excluding family members for superficial reasons is wrong. Rebecca, Madison's parents will be here tomorrow for the rehearsal dinner, Mom said. Can't we handle this privately? Mom, you made this situation public when you excluded me to avoid embarrassing the family in front of Madison's relatives. If you want to fix it, you need to acknowledge your mistake publicly. And if we do that, you'll let the wedding proceed? Tyler asked hopefully. If you do that sincerely, and if you can convince me that you've learned something meaningful from this experience, then yes. But I had one more revelation that would test whether their newfound respect for me was genuine or just another calculation based on self-interest. The next morning, I arrived at Willowbrook Estate early to prepare for what would either be Tyler's wedding day or the day his celebration was cancelled due to his family's inability to demonstrate genuine growth and understanding. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for that evening, followed by the wedding ceremony the next day, but first, my family needed to prove they had learned something meaningful from our confrontation about values, respect, and the consequences of superficial judgments. Madison's parents, Dr. Patricia Hamilton and Dr. James Hamilton, arrived at the venue at 10 a.m. for what they thought was a standard pre-wedding venue walkthrough. Sarah, my venue coordinator, had arranged for them to meet with me in my office to discuss final details and address any concerns about the celebration. When the Hamiltons entered my office, their expressions were polite but slightly puzzled. They clearly weren't sure why the venue owner needed to meet with them personally, but they assumed it was part of the premium service they were paying for. "Dr. and Mrs. Hamilton, thank you for taking time to meet with me," I said, gesturing for them to sit in the chairs across from my desk. "I wanted to discuss some concerns that have arisen regarding your daughter's wedding celebration." "Concerns?" Dr. Hamilton asked, immediately alert. "What kind of concerns?" "Well, it's come to my attention that there have been some guest list changes based on concerns about social compatibility and family image." "I'm not sure I understand," Mrs. Hamilton said carefully. "Specifically, I understand that Tyler's sister was uninvited from the celebration because she was perceived as not sophisticated or successful enough to fit in with your social circle." The Hamiltons exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of this conversation. "I think there may have been some misunderstanding about the family dynamics involved," Dr. Hamilton said diplomatically. "Actually, I think the misunderstanding was about the family member who was excluded," I replied. "You see, Tyler's sister Rebecca is the owner of Willowbrook Estate. The venue you've chosen for your daughter's wedding belongs to the family member you considered too unsuccessful to attend the celebration." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched the Hamiltons process this information, their faces showing a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and dawning recognition of how badly they'd misjudged the situation. She owns this venue?" Mrs. Hamilton asked weakly. "She owns this entire operation. The sophisticated, exclusive environment you wanted for your daughter's wedding was created by the person you thought wasn't refined enough to attend it." Dr. Hamilton was clearly struggling to reconcile this new information with his previous assumptions. "We were told that Rebecca worked in event planning but wasn't particularly successful at it." "Rebecca works in event planning because she owns one of the most successful wedding venues in the region. Your information about her lack of success was completely incorrect." This is very embarrassing," Mrs. Hamilton admitted. "It should be embarrassing. You made judgments about someone's worth based on superficial assumptions, and those judgments were not only wrong but also revealed some troubling values about what you consider important in evaluating people. What can we do to fix this situation?" Dr. Hamilton asked. "You can start by acknowledging that excluding people based on perceived social status is wrong, regardless of how successful those people actually turn out to be. Of course, we never intended, Dr. Hamilton, you intended exactly what happened. You wanted to exclude someone you perceived as unsuccessful because you were worried about how that might reflect on your family's image." The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with the Hamiltons gradually understanding that their mistake wasn't just about being wrong about my success, it was about the values that had led them to exclude me in the first place. Meanwhile, my family was gathered in the venue's bridal suite, preparing for their own reckoning with Madison's parents and the broader wedding party about what had happened and what they'd learned. At 2 p.m., everyone assembled in the main reception hall for what was supposed to be a final wedding preparation meeting but had become a family intervention about respect, inclusion, and the consequences of superficial judgments. Tyler stood up to address the gathered family members, wedding party, and close friends who had arrived early for the rehearsal dinner. "Everyone, Madison and I need to share something important with you about our wedding planning process and some mistakes we made along the way." The room fell quiet, with guests clearly puzzled about why the groom was making what sounded like a confession rather than a celebration. "When we started planning this wedding, we got caught up in concerns about image and social impressions rather than focusing on what really matters, celebrating our love with the people who care about us most." Madison took Tyler's hand and continued the explanation. "We made the terrible mistake of uninviting Tyler's sister Rebecca from our wedding because we were worried she might not fit in with our social circle." Murmurs rippled through the room as people processed this revelation. "What we didn't know," Tyler continued, "is that Rebecca owns Willowbrook Estate. The venue we chose for our dream wedding belongs to the family member we excluded for supposedly not being successful enough. The reaction was immediate and intense. Wedding guests looked around the elegant venue with new understanding, family members who had supported the decision to exclude me looked embarrassed, and the general atmosphere shifted from celebratory to uncomfortable. "We want everyone to understand that what we did was wrong," Madison said, tears in her eyes. "Not because Rebecca turned out to be successful, but because excluding family members based on assumptions about their worth is always wrong." Dr. Hamilton stood up to address the room. "Patricia and I want to apologize as well. We influenced the decision to exclude Rebecca based on superficial concerns about social compatibility, and we were completely wrong both about her circumstances and about our priorities. The lesson we've all learned," Tyler said, looking directly at me, "is that family relationships should be based on love and respect, not on perceptions of success or social status." I stood up from my seat in the back of the room, where I'd been watching my family and Madison's family acknowledge their mistakes in front of everyone who would be attending the wedding. "Tyler, Madison, Dr. and Mrs. Hamilton, I appreciate your public acknowledgement of what went wrong and your commitment to treating family members with respect regardless of their perceived circumstances. Does this mean our wedding can proceed?" Madison asked hopefully. "It means that Willowbrook Estate is comfortable hosting a celebration for people who have demonstrated growth, understanding, and genuine commitment to treating others with dignity." The relief in the room was palpable, but I had one more thing to add. "However, I want everyone here to remember this lesson. The problem wasn't that you misjudged my success, the problem was that you thought my success mattered more than my character. Real sophistication comes from treating people with respect regardless of their circumstances." The wedding proceeded the next day, and it was beautiful. The ceremony was elegant, the reception was flawless, and the celebration was everything Madison had dreamed it would be. But more importantly, it was a gathering of people who had learned something valuable about family, respect, and the difference between genuine class and superficial status consciousness. During his wedding toast, Tyler made sure to acknowledge not just his bride, but the lesson the entire wedding planning process had taught everyone about what really matters in life. "To Rebecca," he said, raising his glass toward me, "who taught us that true success isn't about impressing others, but about building something meaningful and treating everyone with dignity." 6 months after Tyler's wedding, the ripple effects of that dramatic family confrontation have transformed our relationships in ways I never expected. What started as a painful lesson in prejudice and assumptions has become the foundation for healthier, more authentic connections based on genuine understanding rather than superficial judgments. The most significant change has been in how my family discusses success and achievement. Instead of making assumptions about each other's circumstances or worth, we now ask questions, show genuine interest, and celebrate different types of accomplishments. "Rebecca, I want to understand more about your business," Mom said during a recent family dinner at the estate. "I realize I never asked the right questions about what you were building here." "What would you like to know, Mom?" "Everything. How you developed your vision, how you learned to run a business, what challenges you faced, what you're most proud of achieving." These conversations have revealed that my family's dismissive attitude toward my work wasn't just about success, it was about their own insecurities and their narrow definition of what constituted valuable achievement. "I think I was intimidated by your ambition," Dad admitted during one of our talks. "Starting your own business, taking financial risks, building something from nothing, that takes courage that I'm not sure I would have had at your age. Dad, you built a successful accounting practice and provided for our family for 30 years. That took plenty of courage and skill. But it was a traditional path. What you did was entrepreneurial, creative, risky. I think I dismissed it because I didn't understand it, not because it wasn't impressive." Tyler and Madison have also used this experience as an opportunity to examine their own values and priorities. The wedding incident forced them to confront how much they'd been influenced by superficial concerns about image and social status. "Rebecca, planning our wedding taught me something important about myself," Madison told me recently. "I realized I'd been so focused on impressing my parents' friends that I'd lost sight of what a wedding is supposed to be about, celebrating love with the people who matter most." "What matters most to you now?" I asked. Authenticity. Kindness. Treating people well regardless of their circumstances. The things that actually make someone worth knowing. But the most meaningful change has been in how our extended family and social circle understand success and worth. The story of Tyler's wedding has become a cautionary tale about assumptions, but also a celebration of authentic achievement and genuine class. Your story has made me think about how I judge people, my cousin Lisa told me at a family gathering. I realized I make assumptions about people's worth based on surface impressions, just like your family did with you. The business impact has been positive as well. Willowbrook Estate has gained a reputation not just for beautiful celebrations, but for values-based service that prioritizes respect and inclusion. Several clients have specifically mentioned that they chose our venue because they'd heard about our commitment to treating all people with dignity. We want our wedding to be at a place that stands for something meaningful, one bride told me. Your story about choosing principles over profit when your own family made mistakes shows the kind of integrity we want associated with our celebration. The Hamiltons have become unlikely allies in promoting more thoughtful approaches to social events and family relationships. Dr. Hamilton has spoken at several community events about the importance of looking beyond surface impressions when evaluating people. The most successful person at my daughter's wedding was someone I almost excluded for not being successful enough, he said publicly. That taught me that real sophistication comes from recognizing value in all its forms, not from making superficial judgments about people's worth. But perhaps the most important lesson has been about the difference between conditional and unconditional family support. The wedding crisis forced everyone to examine whether our love and respect for each other was based on genuine affection or on assessments of success and social value. Rebecca, I need to apologize for something beyond just the wedding invitation, Mom said during one of our recent conversations. I think I've been treating your success as a reflection of my parenting rather than celebrating it as your achievement. What do you mean? I mean that when I thought you were unsuccessful, I felt like I'd failed as a mother. And now that I know you're successful, I feel proud of myself rather than just proud of you. That's backwards. Mom, parents naturally feel connected to their children's achievements. That's normal. But it becomes problematic when parental pride is conditional on children meeting certain standards of success. You deserved my support and respect when I thought you were struggling, not just now that I know you're thriving. This insight has led to better relationships with my siblings as well, as we've all examined how competition and comparison affected our family dynamics. Here's what I want everyone watching this to understand: family relationships should be based on love and respect, not on assessments of success or social status. The people who truly care about you will support you regardless of your circumstances, and the people who only respect you when you meet their standards of achievement aren't really in your corner. Real success isn't about impressing others or meeting external expectations, it's about building something meaningful and treating people with dignity along the way. The most sophisticated people aren't those who exclude others for not meeting their standards, but those who include others because they understand that worth isn't determined by wealth or status. So here's my question for all of you: have you ever been judged by family members who didn't understand your circumstances? How do you handle people who treat you differently based on their perceptions of your success? What would you do if you discovered that your family's respect was conditional on meeting their standards of achievement? I want to hear your stories about family expectations, superficial judgments, and the difference between genuine class and superficial status consciousness. Hit that like button if this story made you think about how you evaluate others, and subscribe for more real stories about family dynamics and the unexpected ways that success can be misunderstood. Thank you for following this story about assumptions, authenticity, and the importance of treating everyone with respect. Tyler got his dream wedding, and our family learned valuable lessons about what really matters in relationships. Remember, true sophistication comes from recognizing value in all its forms, not from excluding people who don't meet your standards. The most successful people are often those who quietly build meaningful things while others are focused on appearances.